Hello, everyone. This is Gene, and welcome back to Astral Doorway, where we explore and seek to understand all things to do with astral projection. On this episode, I want to talk about one of my most exhilarating experiences out of the body. It involves me going to one of the deepest and sinister parts of the lower astral plane that I've ever been to. And I end up meeting humans who were so unconscious to a point that I didn't even realize was possible. What's more is, during this, I experienced one of the most dramatic shifts from a lower dimension to a higher dimension that I've ever had, and visited an entirely other planet inhabited by joyful humanoid-like beings. Some of you might be familiar with this experience already, since I've written about it before during the time that it happened. But I wanted to get this on the channel and give my more intimate account of this very profound experience, which in some ways I'm still processing due to the shock and sheer significance of the experience. This will probably be one of my longer videos, but it's really impossible to make it short due to the enormity of this astral projection experience. Otherwise, I just wouldn't be doing it justice. And to the best of my ability, I want you to really feel. And to the best of my ability, I want you to really feel what I felt during this whole experience. Just before I get into that, I want to boast about my book and how it's currently #1 or quite high on these new release and bestseller lists on Amazon in the categories of out-of-body experiences, occult parapsychology, and occult astral projection. If you're interested in the book, check out my recent video on it. Maybe it's for you, and maybe it can help you in some way. And also check out the reviews on Amazon. People have left some very descriptive and relevant reviews, which I'm grateful for. We're also basically at 1,000 subscribers now on this channel, so thank you everyone for subscribing. If you're not subscribed already, please do so. Episodes are every Saturday. So let's get to it. This experience started in a vivid but mostly unconscious dream. I was with a group of friends walking around a city at night. We went to a few places, one of them being a jazz bar. In the jazz bar, I was talking to people as well as eating some food that I ordered from the bar. Now, when we decided to leave the jazz bar, my group of friends walked on ahead of me down a road. But because I was so focused on eating my food, I lost sight of them. When I realized this, I began looking for them down dark alleys and city streets. The roads started to become more creepy, with the odd dark figure here and there, and I started to feel a bit of fear in this dream. Not the kind of fear where, it turns into a nightmare and you start screaming uncontrollably, but the opposite. I responded to my fear in a sort of be awake now type of response, right? To be cautious and aware. So this feeling of fear instinctively jolted me into a hyper security lockdown mode, you could say, and I jumped into lucidity. The fear was so powerful that upon becoming lucid, I immediately broke the dream to turn it into astral projection. And now, usually, when I dissolve a dream and enter the astral plane in that way, I usually enter a pleasant or normal astral dimension, but I guess since this entrance into the astral was mostly based out of fear, you could say, I entered into a very desolate and hostile part of the lower astral. If you want to learn how to break dreams or dissolve them in this way, just check out my video on the screen now, which is about how to turn lucid dreams into astral projection. So, in the dream, I was in a dark city of mostly black and grey colours. But now I was in a crumbling, fiery, post-apocalyptic city of smoky black and red colours. The red and orange hue was mostly from little pockets of fire I saw here and there in buildings. I did not like where I was, especially because I intended to get out of this type of eerie surroundings, right? That was the purpose of getting out of that lucid dream, so that I could get out of those dark alleyways and into a more normal astral plane. But the complete opposite happened, and I ended up in the lower astral. But it's funny, right? How I was previously already in a dark city. So was my dream an indication that my consciousness was already inadvertently and unconsciously traveling around in this sort of dimension? But now with the awakening of my consciousness, I saw it in a truer light. Who knows? But anyhow, this astral dimension I found myself in, I don't know how to describe it. There was like a disgusting grunge and insidiousness in the air. It was horrible. I would never want to go there or wish for anyone to go there. Everywhere I looked, there was crumbling and damaged cement on the buildings and pavements, and the air was filled with this ominous black smoke which filled the entire sky. It just looked like death. Anyway, staying in the most zen-like state of mind that I usually do while out of body, which was even more important to do in this dimension, I continued to walk down more streets just to see what I could find. I passed a lot of abandoned shops and pubs and restaurants, all with just this eerie atmosphere and fire here and there. It looked very English, like London in the Dark Ages. Eventually, as I carried on exploring, I walked around a corner to a large open courtyard area, and I saw people walking around in a slow and strange manner. They were all walking individually and aimlessly, like they were drunk. And on closer inspection, I was shocked to realize they looked like they were diseased people who belonged in a hospital, or better yet, a graveyard. The best way I can describe them is that they were literally zombies. Completely unconscious individuals with very little sign of intelligence, if at all any. They literally were the walking dead. I always thought typical Hollywood movies of zombies were just an over-exaggerated reflection of humanity's lower forms of consciousness, but no, here I was, watching it in the most direct and real way. This is a sad situation, really, and reflecting on it now, I contemplate the lives of those individuals, but at the time of the experience, there I was, in the lower astral plane, and my kind of animal instinctive side was on high alert. You know, I was only concerned about being very cautious about how I should proceed next. But I wasn't that fearful, actually, because, of course, I was intending not to be fearful, but also because if you listen to my previous video, I've met scarier and ill-intended beings before who actually had intention and intelligence. But these zombie-like people looked so feeble that they didn't seem like much of a threat. Actually, I considered if I could help these people, who I knew deep down were really just completely lost souls. And as I was looking at this area of mindless zombies walking around, one of them noticed me. He looked at me, and I also took a good look at him. His entire body, face, arms, hands, and legs had rashes, scars, and blood on them, and his skin was overall grey, as if he was a lifeless corpse. His clothes were torn, ragged, and dirty. I then looked at him as an overall being, and I looked into his eyes to try and catch a glimpse of some form of astral telepathy, right? I did perhaps see some life, some humanness deep down in his eyes, locked away somewhere. But it was hard to connect with him because on the surface was just this strong, guarded emotion of malice and hostility. People have asked me, since these beings are in a concrete city wearing human clothes, it heavily suggests that they were once normal people. So, how do you think they got there? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe someone in the comments has a better idea. But like I said, I didn't get a clear reading from them. And I didn't have time either, as you'll see what happens next. But what I can speculate on is, these are people suffering in the lower astral. Not because they were sent here because of some divine law, but because of personal karma, right? Personal cause and effect. They're there not so much because of something they did, but as a result of the way they were or have lived their life for many years, I assume. Perhaps they lived an extremely angry or depressed life, but what I think is more plausible is that it's something to do with addiction, more particularly drug abuse, or perhaps they were alcoholics, but more likely something to do with being heroin addicts. And I've seen these sort of people in the physical too. I don't know where you live, but I used to live in the north of the UK, in a city where there were a lot of drug addicts roaming around on the streets. The impressions I got from them are really not that different from these zombie-like people in the astral. If you've ever seen homeless drug addicts who are on some real bad, hard drugs like heroin or spice, walking around like zombies, talking garbage, harassing people, then you'll know what I mean. Anyhow, getting back to this particular zombie friend, where we were stood looking at each other, I considered for a moment if I could talk to him. But he then began to suddenly run at me with this unearthly growl. I didn't run because I wasn't just going to be chased in the astral, right? That would probably end up in all sorts of mayhem, maybe with a horde following me or something. I just stood there, and as he got within inches of me, without thinking, I instinctively raised my hand towards him, and I cast a force of light, which threw him backwards and into the air, and he fell on the ground about 50 feet away from me. I knew that once he got up, he was probably going to come straight back for me, and others probably would too, so I intended to just get the hell out of there. I intended to leave, not run away, but in a dimensional shift sense, right? And so upon intending to leave, I found myself traveling down under the ground. And as I started falling deep underground, I heard this very infernal, demonic voice in my ear, and I realized I was traveling in the totally wrong direction. Now, I'll admit, at this point, that struck a big chord of fear in me. If I was going even lower in this dimension, I didn't even want to think about where I'd go next. And so, with that fear, I plucked up all my meditative focus, and with pure willpower and determination, I chanted the mantra Om. And at the same time, I forcefully flew upwards as fast and as powerfully as I could. If you're ever trying something in the astral and you ever think it's not working, whatever it is, and you've tried everything else, then just simply use pure force, pure strength, and sheer will. I guarantee if you have enough fortitude and willpower, you can do almost anything. So, with this forced intent, I flew back up through the ground and continued high in the sky, and I saw my zombie friend and the crowd of other zombies beneath me, and they became smaller as I flew faster upwards and gaining speed. Now, the fear that I got from that dimension and the desire to escape it must have become so great and given me such a powerful surge of energy, because the next part blew my mind. As I was flying upwards, I was still in that state of mind of, get the hell out of there. And I was still continuously, loudly mantralizing the mantra Om. And as I did, I continued to just intend to go faster and faster and as high as I could. Now, I've done this technique to go to a higher dimension before, and usually I'll do it and arrive at a normal and pleasant dimension of the middle or higher astral in an Earth-like dimension. But this time, it's like I had this enormous propelling momentum that I couldn't stop, and I didn't want to stop. As I traveled faster and faster, I experienced the whole energy of myself sort of merge into this vibrating celestial consciousness. And I actually felt my head, or crown chakra, you could say, start to open and expand. And this sensation went down through my entire body. I felt this as me penetrating the Earth's atmosphere and entering space's cosmic energy. At this point, I felt myself without a body, and I was just pure, vibrating, traveling awareness. I've never felt a shift or energy like this so consciously and detailed. I was enjoying it, I loved it, and I let the whole sensation take over me. I became one with it, and I clearly intended to go as far through the stars as I possibly could. I then seemed to go into a hyperspeed type of traveling, and I intensely and vividly experienced my consciousness shift through a sort of interstellar tunnel. And as I traveled through it, I saw stars, planets, asteroids, and colorful space clouds go past me, or I was going past them. Because what's interesting is that at first, it felt as though I was moving forward at a fast speed, right? And I was moving past everything. But actually, I began to feel as though instead of me moving forward, matter and objects moved past me instead. It was a peculiar sensation. This is basically what science would call wormhole travel. Wormhole in the sense that to travel to one place to another, space and time bends for you instead of you traveling from A to B as we usually do in physical life, like the diagram on the screen. As this incredible voyage was happening, the sensation of myself began to become more still, and I then eventually saw this neon blue sapphire planet in front of me. I tried to look online for the closest depiction of this planet that I could find, and this was the best one. Once I saw this planet, I had a moment of calm unconsciousness for a moment, and then I found myself back in my usual form in a bright white room in a tall building. It must have been about 40 stories up. The room was immaculate with all white furniture, and I was looking out at this wide floor-length window overlooking the most beautiful and majestic vastness of crystal clear blue ocean I'd ever seen. I just stood there taking in this amazing view. Far in the horizon, just above the sea, there was this golden light. And as I looked upwards, the sky dispersed in color into this golden neon blue gradient. It's really like nothing I've ever seen before. It was inspiring. If I could take a picture for artists to see, I wish I could draw it. Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps just recalling it now. It was just pure radiance. If anyone ever needs healing, I recommend this place. Pain just cannot exist in such a place. It just felt like pure life force from this expanse of nature. I guess even a picture wouldn't do it justice because it emanated feelings of joy and love too. As I looked down more closely towards the building I was in, there was this island in the middle of the ocean with beautiful and colorful tropical like trees and vegetation that I didn't recognize but looked very interesting. And what I saw next, even closer to me, were these huge sea creatures the size of whales swimming in groups. They were stunning. And this species of sea creature looked like a mix of a whale, a koi fish, and a goldfish at the same time. And then I noticed these people, or humanoids for a better word. They were swimming in the ocean with these giant fish, and some of them were even going around in boat-like vehicles, and there were others on platforms floating on the sea, and they were diving into the water, and they were all just having all sorts of fun, having the absolute time of their lives. Now, I couldn't get a very close look at them because I was so high up, but they seemed to be quite tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall, and I don't think they had much hair and were clearly very good and flexible swimmers. I would have gone down to see them, but I didn't want to intrude. You know, even though these beings were alien to me, I was, in fact, the one who felt alien, and I didn't want to draw any attention to myself. But anyhow, I was enjoying myself, and I felt pure joy and pure happiness and playfulness from these beings that I was observing. And what was interesting is I sensed that they had a very close bond with those giant sea creatures. Even though the creatures were big, they were gentle with these humanoid people. They would jump in the air over them, and I would hear the people cheering with their arms in the air as the fish went over them. Yeah, the whole scene was amazing to see. Their energy and laughter was uplifting and peaceful. This place was just wonderful, and I found myself just smiling and observing them. The positive energy was infectious. Any fear that I had before had long passed. It was such a stark contrast to the previous place I had just been to in the lower astral. But why did I end up here out of anywhere else in the vastness of space? Actually, my interests in astral projection haven't lied much in visiting other planets or aliens. I've never been that interested in humanoid like species or oceanic planets like this one. So this was all bizarre and new to me. As I was looking at them, I eventually looked around my room that I was in, and I saw a holographic screen on a wall to the left of me, which had a map and a little indicator with some alien text on it that I didn't recognize, but I was pretty sure it was indicating my location. Of course, I didn't recognize where I was, and most of it was just water. I remember it quite clearly. I could probably draw it on a map. But yes, the fact that it was mostly water made me realize this was definitely mostly a water-based planet, much like the many oceanic exoplanets that scientists are discovering at the moment. Now, this feeling of being on another planet became even stronger when I saw their moon in the sky towards the very right of the window. It was maybe triple the size of our moon, and it was bright. But when I say bright, I mean as bright as a star. It was so bright that it had solar flares beaming from its sides, like it was a hot moon, if that is even considered possible amongst modern physics. I was baffled and was trying to figure out if the sun was behind it or if the sun was close by. But as I stared at it, I began to feel off balance. And as I did, I heard a female voice in the room next to me. She started telling me about this place, but unfortunately, I was losing consciousness. I could almost make out her appearance next to me at the other side of the room, but I couldn't because I could feel myself about to either lose the experience or wake up. I just told her that I had to go because I felt myself losing energy, but even though I couldn't see her, I could feel her smiling at me, and I felt feelings of warmth and love from her. And she was the last memory that I had of this place. I sort of just lost the tuning of that frequency, you could say. I didn't struggle for long to try and stay there. I let myself go. I didn't wake up immediately like I do sometimes. There was this peaceful and slow transition of my awareness coming back to my physical body. Perhaps because of how far away I was from my physical body, I don't know. But once I eventually woke up, I recalled everything all the way up to when I was in a dream in the jazz bar and going to see those zombie beings. The fact that I was in a hotel-like building with a screen with my location and a huge viewing window made me feel like this was designed for visitors, perhaps other astral visitors. And this planet felt like happiness and leisure was a usual way of life there. It felt very light and positive, a lot different from Earth, basically. Whilst recalling the experience, I had a sense that I had maybe been to that planet before in some form or another. The woman in the room with me at the end of the experience felt familiar. Maybe I had a past life there, or I've unconsciously visited the place before. I don't know. Maybe that's the reason I went there out of anywhere else in the galaxy, because by getting a jolt of fear in the lower astral, perhaps a deeper part of me wanted to go to somewhere familiar, somewhere safe, positive, and happy. Two things come to mind the most out of this experience. One is the peculiarity of the moon and how it shined like a sun. And the other is, who were those highly positive, humanoid-like aquatic species? If any of you have insights at all, I'm very interested in your comments, which I always read. A few people have said things like, it is actually possible for moons to glow like that. I know that I think one of Jupiter's moons is a very hot moon with lots of volcanoes on it, if that's correct. And other people have said that the species I saw are related to mer people, so like mermaids and mermen. Someone also said that I visited Sirius B, a star system, I think, and that those beings are in a transitional stage between fifth and sixth density. I appreciate absolutely any interpretation, so let me know if you have any ideas. So, I hope you enjoyed this account of one of my most profound experiences. I really am still processing it in some ways, and I hope I can remember to carry the intention to investigate that planet more in the future. And yes, this experience is also just one example of how we can gain interesting experiences in the lower astral. And, instead of acting out of fear, we can calmly proceed to more profound levels of reality if we act in a calm and deliberate way. So, thank you for listening to this longer type of video. Most of my videos are probably half the length. If you'd like to support the channel on Patreon, there's a link in the description below. And if you'd like to have similar experiences like this yourself, or you're just learning how to astral project, I recently made a video on a step-by-step guide on how to astral project. Maybe that will help you on your path to these out-of-body realizations of consciousness. I hope you all have your own dimensional shifts in consciousness, and I will see you on the astral plane.